My name is Margaret Lewis, and I am 71 years old. When people look at me now, they see a frail old woman with silver hair and a slow gait, someone who needs help climbing stairs or carrying groceries. What they don't see is the woman I used to be, the one who worked 2 jobs to put food on the table, the one who sacrificed every dream she ever had so her children could have better lives than she did. I was born in 1954, in a small coal town where survival was the only ambition most people had. My father worked long, back-breaking shifts in the mines, returning home every evening covered in soot, his cough echoing through the house like a drumbeat. My mother, a seamstress, spent her days hunched over a sewing machine, stitching clothes for other people's children while patching ours with scraps. We were poor, but we had dignity, and my parents instilled in me the value of hard work. As a child, I dreamed of becoming a teacher. My parents didn't think it was possible. We could barely afford my school books, let alone college tuition. But I was stubborn. I babysat. I cleaned houses. I worked every odd job a young girl could find, stashing away coins and dollar bills in a tin box under my bed. When I finally earned a scholarship to a teacher's college, I thought I had made it. For 4 years, I juggled classes and waitressing jobs, often studying in the dim light of the diner kitchen after midnight. I was exhausted, but I was determined. When I graduated, holding that degree in my hands, I felt I had not just achieved something for myself, but broken a cycle of poverty that had chained my family for generations. Not long after, I met Richard. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a laugh that filled every room. He worked as a mechanic, steady and reliable, and he adored me in a way that made me feel cherished. We married quickly, bought a modest brick house with creaky floors, and before long, we had 2 children, Michael and Sarah. Those early years were both beautiful and brutal. Money was tight, and Richard's health began to falter earlier than we expected. He had a weak heart, something we didn't realize until the day it gave out when he was just 47. Suddenly, I was a widow with 2 teenagers and a mortgage, staring down the rest of my life alone. I wanted to fall apart, but I didn't have the luxury, so I worked. I taught during the day, tutored in the evenings, and in the summers, I picked up shifts at the local library. I patched up our old house with my own 2 hands, painted peeling walls, and fixed leaky faucets. I made sure Michael and Sarah never missed out on anything. Sarah wanted dance lessons. I found the money. Michael needed braces. I took on another shift. I went without new clothes, without vacations, without so much as a new winter coat for years, because every dollar I saved was another dollar that went toward their futures. I watched as they flourished, as Sarah earned her nursing degree and Michael became an accountant. The pride I felt was immeasurable. As they grew older, they built their own families, and I thought my sacrifices had been worth it. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the distance grew. Phone calls became less frequent, visits shorter. They were always busy, too busy for dinners, too busy for birthdays. They remembered Mother's Day with flowers delivered by courier instead of with hugs and laughter around my kitchen table. The only one who never drifted away was Emily, my granddaughter, Sarah's daughter. She was the light of my life, a bright-eyed, gentle soul who visited me after school, carrying her backpack and a smile that melted every ache in my tired bones. She would sit at my table, drinking tea with far too much sugar, and chatter about her friends, her dreams, her books. Sometimes she would help me with groceries. Other times, she would simply sit and read to me. Emily didn't come because she had to. She came because she wanted to. It was around my 70th birthday that Michael and Sarah began to show their true colours. At first, it was subtle. Comments about how much work it must be to keep up the house, how unsafe it was for me to live alone. They made it sound like concern, but I could hear the undertone. They weren't worried about me. They were eyeing the house. One Sunday, they came together, something that in itself was rare. They sat me down at the dining room table, the very table where I had once cut birthday cakes and helped with school projects. Michael spoke first, his voice rehearsed. "Mum, we've been talking. We think it's time you moved into a retirement community. You'd be safer there. You'd have people your age, activities, meals prepared. You wouldn't have to worry about this old house anymore." Sarah chimed in, her tone falsely sweet. "We've already toured a few places. They're really nice, Mom. You'll love it." I looked at them, my own children, and asked quietly, "And what about my home?" Michael didn't even blink. "We can sell it. The market's great right now. The money can help cover your expenses, and whatever's left can be split fairly between us. Between us, not me. Them." I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, while the children I had given my entire life to spoke of, carving up my home like vultures circling a carcass. They didn't see the memories soaked into these walls. The nights I stayed up sewing Sarah's costumes for her recitals, the mornings I packed Michael's lunches before school, the holidays when the house rang with laughter. They only saw dollar signs. I felt something inside me fracture, but I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply nodded, as if I agreed. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and realized with a bitter clarity that my children no longer saw me as their mother. To them, I was an obligation, a burden, a means to an end. My sacrifices were forgotten, my love taken for granted. But I had not survived 71 years, poverty, widowhood, and decades of toil without learning a thing or two about strength. If they thought I would go quietly into the role of the obedient old woman, they were mistaken. I decided then and there that I would play their game. I would nod, smile, and let them think they had won. But silently, I would make sure that when the time came, they would realize just how wrong they were. After that Sunday conversation, my children grew bolder. It was as though my quiet nod had opened a door for them, and they were ready to push me through it. Michael stopped by more often, not to see how I was doing, but to check on the house. He would run his hand along the banister, comment on the cracks in the plaster, shake his head at the sagging back porch. "This place won't hold up much longer, Mum," he would say, as if the house hadn't already stood through half a century of storms, laughter, and life. Sarah came armed with brochures. She slid them across my dining room table as though they were treasures. "Look, Mum, this one has a garden club. You've always loved your flowers, and this one has bingo nights, exercise classes, even a shuttle bus that takes you shopping." I smiled politely, feigned interest, and let them talk. All the while, a plan was forming in the back of my mind. At night, when the house was silent and the only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, I would sit at the same oak desk where I had balanced bills, signed permission slips, and written countless lesson plans. I pulled out my files, deeds, savings accounts, investment papers. I ran my fingers over the documents like a soldier inspecting weapons before battle. This house was more than wood and brick. It was my life's work. I had paid for every inch of it with my sweat, my health, and my years. And if my children saw it only as money, then they had no right to it. The next morning, I made a phone call. Mr. Collins, my lawyer, had handled my affairs for years. He was a patient, kind man with a shock of white hair and a way of listening that made you feel truly heard. "Margaret," he said warmly when I arrived at his office, "what brings you in today?" I looked him squarely in the eye. "I need to change my will." His eyebrows rose, but he didn't ask why. Instead, he gestured for me to sit, poured me a glass of water, and took out his notepad. "To my granddaughter Emily," I said, my voice steady, "I leave everything. My home, my savings, my investments, everything I own." "And your children?" he asked carefully. I smiled, though there was no joy in it. "To Michael and Sarah I leave nothing, except, perhaps, the lesson that love and respect cannot be bought or demanded. They had my care for 70 years. That was their inheritance." Mr. Collins hesitated. "Margaret, are you sure about this?" "It's a bold choice." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied. The papers were drawn up, signed, and sealed. I walked out of that office lighter than I had felt in years. When Emily came to visit that evening, I made her a cup of tea and watched as she added 3 spoonfuls of sugar, the way she always did. I studied her face, her youth, her kindness, the way she listened with genuine interest as I told her about my day. "Emily," I said gently, "do you know how much I love you?" She looked up, startled by the seriousness in my tone. "Of course I do, Grandma." "I love you too." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I want you to promise me something. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll never let anyone make you feel like you're only worth what you can give them." Her brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "One day, you will," I said softly. Meanwhile, Michael and Sarah continued their campaign. They scheduled tours of retirement communities and insisted I come along. I obliged, playing the part of the compliant old woman. I walked through the pristine halls, admired the manicured gardens, nodded at the friendly staff. But in my heart, I knew I would never belong there. Those places smelled of endings, and I wasn't finished yet. Back at home, I noticed changes in the way my children spoke about me. Their words dripped with condescension. "Mum, you shouldn't be climbing ladders anymore. Don't strain yourself with the garden. Leave the heavy lifting to us." But of course, they never lifted anything. They were preparing me for a role I refused to play, that of the helpless old woman waiting quietly to hand over everything she had built. One evening, I overheard a conversation between Michael and Sarah in the kitchen. They thought I had gone to bed, but the thin walls carried their voices. "If we sell the house now, we could split at least $300,000, Michael whispered. "Don't rush her," Sarah replied. "Let her think it's her idea. Once she's settled in a retirement home, she won't even notice the house is gone. We'll handle the money." Their words struck me like knives. I had given them everything, my time, my energy, my youth, and now they spoke about me as if I were already gone. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. But instead of despair, I felt something else rise within me. A quiet, determined strength. Let them talk. Let them plan. They thought they were clever, but they had no idea that I had already taken everything out of their hands. As the weeks passed, I continued to play along. I packed a few boxes, labeling them neatly, giving the impression that I was preparing to leave. Michael and Sarah were pleased. "You're making the right choice, Mom," Sarah said, patting my hand. "You'll thank us one day." But the truth was, it wasn't gratitude I would feel. It was satisfaction. Emily, though, saw through me. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden, she asked, "Grandma, why are you going along with this? You love this house." I looked at her, my sweet granddaughter with eyes so much like mine once were, and I smiled. Because sometimes, my dear, silence is the sharpest sword. She tilted her head, puzzled, but said nothing. Eventually, the day came when Michael and Sarah announced they had found the perfect place for me. They drove me to the retirement community, a shiny new building with cheerful staff and pastel-coloured walls. "See, Mum?" Sarah said brightly. "Isn't it lovely?" I smiled, nodded, and signed the papers. Let them think they had won. What they didn't know was that in a drawer in Mr. Collins's office sat a document that would change everything. The first weeks in the retirement community were strange. The staff were kind enough, the meals were decent, and the gardens were neat and orderly. But it wasn't home. My home had creaky floors, the smell of roses drifting through the windows in summer, and walls that held the laughter of decades. This place was clean, but sterile, safe, but soulless. Michael and Sarah visited occasionally, but not to see me. Not really. Their eyes always wandered, calculating, as though they were already counting the money they thought they would inherit. Michael would ask, "So, Mum, how are you finding it here? Do you need anything?" But his tone was distracted, impatient. Sarah was no better, fussing about my health while sneaking glances at her watch. They were already thinking ahead to the day when they wouldn't have to pretend anymore. Emily, however, visited nearly every day. She brought me books, chocolates, flowers from the garden I once tended. She sat by my bed, read aloud when my eyes grew tired, and listened when I felt like talking about the past. She never asked for anything. She just gave her time and her love. It reminded me that despite everything, I had done something right in this world. As months passed, my health began to decline. My body felt heavier, my steps slower, my nights longer. I could feel the years catching up to me, and I knew my time was growing short. I wasn't afraid. I had lived a full life, and I had already made peace with my decisions. When I was too weak to leave my bed, Emily came and held my hand. "Grandma," she whispered, her eyes wet with tears, "I don't want to lose you." I smiled faintly, squeezing her fingers. "My darling, you'll never lose me. I'll always be with you." Here I touched her chest, where her heart beat strong and steady. Michael and Sarah came less often toward the end. Perhaps they couldn't bear to see me frail, or perhaps they simply didn't care to. But I knew they were waiting for the call, for the funeral, for the moment when they believed their payday would arrive. That day came sooner than expected. One cold winter morning, as snow dusted the trees outside the window, I closed my eyes for the last time. Emily was with me, her hand wrapped around mine, her tears falling onto my skin. My final breath was a sigh of relief, not sorrow. My funeral was simple, as I had requested. A modest service, some hymns, a scattering of roses. People cried, spoke kindly of me, and then returned to their lives. Michael and Sarah stood side by side, dressed in black, whispering to each other when they thought no one was watching. Their eyes weren't filled with grief. They were filled with expectation. The will was to be read the following week at Mr. Collins' office. I wasn't there, of course, but Emily later told me everything. Michael and Sarah arrived dressed smartly, their spouses in tow, their faces carefully arranged into masks of solemnity. They sat across from each other at the polished wooden table, hands folded, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Emily sat quietly in the corner, small and unassuming, her grief still raw. Mr. Collins entered, carrying a thick folder. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. "To my beloved granddaughter Emily," he said, who has shown me love, loyalty, and kindness without expectation. I leave my home, my savings, and all of my estate. To my children, Michael and Sarah, I leave only my love and the hope that one day they may understand the true meaning of family. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Michael's face turned crimson, his jaw tightening. Sarah's eyes widened, her lips trembling as tears spilled down her cheeks. Their spouses shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "What?" Michael exploded, slamming his fist onto the table. "This is ridiculous. She can't do this. We're her children." Mr. Collins remained calm. She could, and she did. "These documents are legal and binding. Your mother made her wishes very clear." Sarah sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "She must have been manipulated. Someone must have influenced her." Emily, shaken but steady, spoke softly. "No one manipulated her. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted me to have it, because I loved her, not her money." Michael turned on her, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you deserve all of it? You think one granddaughter is worth more than her own children?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. "I didn't want her money. I wanted her time. And she gave it to me." That was enough. Mr. Collins closed the folder, his voice final. "The matter is settled. The estate belongs to Emily. There is nothing more to discuss." Michael stormed out of the office, his face red with fury. Sarah lingered, broken, sobbing quietly before finally leaving. Their spouses trailed after them, silent, ashamed. Emily sat alone in the room for a long while after, her hands shaking as she held the documents. She told me later that she felt a mix of guilt and gratitude. But I hope in time she will understand that what I left her was not just money or a house. It was the recognition of her love, the reward for her loyalty, the proof that kindness is never wasted. Michael and Sarah never spoke to Emily again after that day. Their bitterness consumed them, and they could not see past their greed. But Emily thrived. She cared for the house, filled it with laughter and warmth, and carried forward the love I had always hoped would live on. And me? I rest peacefully, knowing that in the end, justice was served. My children learned too late that inheritance is not a right, but a privilege earned through love and respect. Sometimes revenge is not loud or violent. Sometimes it is a whisper, a signature on a piece of paper, a final act of truth. I do not regret my choice, because sometimes the sweetest revenge is silence, and sometimes the greatest legacy is teaching those who take you for granted that love cannot be bought, demanded, or faked. And so my story ends, not with anger, but with peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that in the end, I took back my power, not with fury, but with quiet dignity.